These are the most bizarre churches from around the world.
12. The Cathedral of Maringá, Brazil. This modern church literally stands out. It's a conical steeple reaching 124 meters high, like a Tower of Babel. The Catholic cathedral towers over the green-treed park around it. The design of the church was inspired by a need to bring people closer to God. Well, it does that by 124 meters, because you can climb 598 steps to a viewing platform that looks down over the city. The steps are in a cavity between the inner and outer walls of the conical shape. And as you ascend, you will find many gravestones dedicated to people who chose to be buried in the walls of the cathedral. The first stone of any building is a big deal, but the first stone of this cathedral is really special, as it was a piece of marble from the St. Paul's Basilica in Rome. The marble was blessed by Pope Pius XII himself. Ironically, from such a traditional Catholic beginning, the church's architecture was inspired by the Russian Sputnik satellite. 11. Ružica Church, Belgrade, Serbia. Strap in, because this church's history has more unexpected turns than a roller coaster. In the 1800s, Ružica Church was a munitions warehouse located in Belgrade. In 1869, it became a Serbian Orthodox church which proudly served its military congregation. But because of its history as an ammunition stash, during World War I, it was targeted by bombs and experienced heavy damage. After the war, the ruins of the church stood empty. In 1925, it was decided that the church should be renovated, but also pay homage to the horrors of war. The architect took inspiration from what brought it down and rebuilt the building again with remnants of artillery, military paraphernalia, and weapons. Chandeliers were crafted from cannonballs, broken swords of fallen officers, and military coffin handles. The creativity of the crypt didn't end there. Candle holders were made from bullet casings. The meaning behind it was the brass bullets that brought death would perpetually be illuminated by the light of the candle, showing the illuminating nature of faith. Artillery shells were melted down to cast two statues in the church for the entranceway. However you look at it, it's a clear tribute to the country's past and the history of the building that the church inhabits. Whether it brings peace having so many weapons of destruction around is a matter of opinion. 10. Cadet Chapel, Colorado, USA. This church is truly inspiring architecture. It is clearly a reflection of the Air Force's tools of the trade, the airplane mixed with the grandeur of a place of worship. The architect was a man named Walter Netsch, who created something truly spectacular by pointing the nose shape up of the symbolic plane.
This is repeated 17 times, resulting in a momentous spired building that resembles a classic cathedral, but also a space center from a far-off galaxy.
The building was completed in 1992. Because of its uniqueness and show-stopping design, it was named a U.S. National Historic Landmark in 2004. 9. Chapel of the Holy Cross, Sedona, Arizona, USA. This church site between two mounds perched above a desert landscape in a national forest is thought to be an energy vortex. It is popular with believers in New Age things who believe that the boundary between worlds is thin in the area and that more spiritual healing can be accessed. It was built in the 1950s and was a big deviation from the stable church architecture of the past hundreds of years. Cleaner lines and modern architecture were inspired by a visit to the Empire State Building, and the designer was determined to create a modern church that pushed boundaries and new ideas. And we can all agree that a linear, glass and concrete church pressed against red rock cliffs is a great start for breaking the mold to a modern era of places of worship. The modernist architecture is a huge draw card for tourists to the church and a popular place of worship for New Age enthusiasts. 8. Hallgrímskirkja, Iceland. Its looming facade has authority like no other, and it's impossible to miss the resemblance to basalt lava flow formations that dominate Iceland's landscape. By way of description, the church resembles an upside-down V made up of thin, tall white beams culminating in a bell tower with 3 dark windows. The square in front of the church is a geometric pattern that seems out of a fantasy film.
But it is the interiors that contain even more treasures. Sculptures of famous Icelandic figures like explorer Leif Erikson are on display, but it's at the top of the tower that the best views of Reykjavik can be found.
7. Reading Between the Lines Church, Belgium. Church and state in Europe have had a very complicated relationship, from being so intertwined to almost non-existent in many countries in Western Europe. And even though churches struggle to fill their pews with the faithful, their presence dominates European cities. Two architects decided to build a piece of art in response to this dichotomy of omnipresence and irrelevance of churches in Europe today. They called the piece Reading Between the Lines. The church is literally constructed from lines made by 100 layers of thin steel beams stacked. The slatted appearance makes it possible to see right through the church, giving you a view of the landscape behind it. But at another angle, the steel lines up and it appears a solid structure. In essence, you could say the church is there just as much as it isn't there. 6. Tempeliaukio Church, Helsinki, Finland. Tempeliaukio Church means Church of the Rock, for the simple reason that this church is built solidly into a rock. But it isn't a dark cave-like place. Natural light streams in through a glass and copper dome. The cave also boasts beautiful acoustics that bounce sound around the stone walls. The church has stood since 1969 as an underground house of worship.
It is carved out of the bedrock in the center of Helsinki and welcomes a massive number of tourists every year, with over 500,000 visitors annually.
5. Salt Mine Chapel, Wieliczka Salt Mine in Poland. When miners risk their lives every day, it's understandable that they would want to pop in to make good with the big guy before they go to work. For that reason, the Wieliczka Salt Mine in Poland is riddled with beautiful chapels carved directly out of the salt. As the mines progressed deeper, the chapels continued inward too, and older ones were demolished for their salt. There are 5 main chapels remaining, located hundreds of feet underground, that are used for worship, tourism, and even weddings. 4. Trinity Church, King George Island, Antarctica. Enter the southernmost Orthodox church in the world, and if you want to visit it, best you layer up with all the winter woolies you own. In the 1990s, Trinity Church was commissioned by Patriarch Alexis II, and so this permanently staffed spiritual outpost was built. Standing 45 feet tall, it's large enough to house 30 people at a time, and is constructed from wood.
The church itself was constructed in Russia in its entirety and then transported by supply ship to its current location. The church has celebrated weddings, baptisms, funerals, and festivals, and now prays for the souls of 64 Russians who lost their lives in various expeditions in the harsh tundra.
3. Sagrada Familia, Barcelona, Spain. This church is the most ambitious church on this list, and when the first stone was laid in 1882, we doubt architect Antoni Gaudi ever imagined that it would only be completed in 2026, a century after his death. The plans were changed, reworked, scrapped, and then exchanged for grander visions by Gaudi up until his death in 1926. But what he left the world was an incredible piece of modernista architecture, the likes of which have never been seen. During the 130 years or so of construction, there have been setbacks, civil war, vandalism, and fires, which have all caused damage and halted construction, but the work continues now more than ever. The final church will be formed by 3 major facades. The Passion and the Nativity facade are already complete, but the Glory facade remains an ongoing construction. The Nativity facade was mostly completed by Gaudi himself and was finished first. The Passion facade contains gaunt, tortured figures. These figures have received harsh criticism, but they are true to Gaudi's original vision of a facade meant to inspire fear. The Glory facade only began construction in 2002 and is expected to be the largest and most impressive of the 3. 18 spires will complete the structure. So far, 8 are built, and the tallest of all will symbolize Jesus Christ, securing Sagrada Familia's place as the world's largest church building. 2. Chêne Chapelle, France. Forget stone. Why not just grow a church from wood? Oak, to be exact. Well, that's exactly how the Chêne Chapelle, or Chapel Oak, came about.
This 800-year-old tree became known as a holy place when William the Conqueror prayed under its branches before he left for England. Then, in the 17th century, the tree was struck by lightning, which ignited the wood inside, but left the outer part of the tree intact and alive.
The local abbot and priest saw this as a divine sign and commissioned a conversion of the tree into a chapel. The damaged part of the tree was hollowed out, a spiral staircase added, and the tree was open for worship. 1. San Francisco de Asís Church, Ranchos de Taos, New Mexico. This lowly adobe church has inspired the most depictions of any church in the USA. It boasts paintings by famous painters like Georgia O'Keeffe and photographs by Ansel Adams and Paul Strand, who are all taken with the beauty of this Spanish missions church in New Mexico. Construction began around 1772, but the church was not completed until 1815, when it was officially opened by Franciscan fathers, and its patron saint is St. Francis of Assisi. According to Georgia O'Keeffe, she believes that it is one of the most beautiful buildings left in the United States.